Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Build Computers. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Corsair H75 water cooler. This is one of Corsair's baby water cooling units, and it begs the question, or it begs a few questions, of firstly, is it worth buying a small water cooler rather than just air cooling? Because water cooling, usually as soon as you go onto the larger ones like the H100, the H110, you're looking at about £100 or so for your water cooling system. Now with those bigger water coolers, you know you're going to get the performance and the silence, but what about these smaller ones? Is it going to be any cooler than stock cooling? Is it going to be any quieter than stock cooling? Other than the street cred of having a water cooling loop in your computer, is it worth getting one of these, or should you just save the money and invest it somewhere else in the system? So let's unbox this and take a look at what we've got. So, despite only being a 120mm radiator, we do still get dual fans for this fella. And these are Corsair's PWM 4-pin fans as well. These are good fans, they've got quiet performance, they look smart. So we've got a pair of those in here. And we've got various fittings of all shapes and sizes. This includes AMD and Intel fittings, so whichever CPU you've got, this will fit it. And what we also have in here is a splitter, so you can run this water cooler from a single 4-pin PWM connector, because not all motherboards have got two of them. A lot of them, the secondary CPU fan connector, if it even has one, is quite often only a 3-pin. So let's take the main system out. Alright, I'm just going to replace this plastic cover over there because we've got some pre-applied thermal paste that I don't want to disturb quite yet. Right, now this isn't Corsair's newest water cooler. The I series, which is like the H100i and the H110i, they have a newer model of the pump head, which has an updated design and additional features. This one, for example, it's getting its main power from a 3-pin connector, and it doesn't have the Corsair Link interface on it, which means you get less monitoring from this one. Now the Corsair Link one allows you to monitor various things like the pump speed, water temperature, all kinds of fancy stuff like that, which is really cool for tinkerers and people who want to show off their system. The Corsair Link ones also have an updated logo with an RGB LED on it, so you can style it to suit the case and things like that. This one, however, is a much simpler design, but despite it being an older and simpler design, it's still visually attractive. These hoses are also nice and flexible, they don't kink easily, so this will fit into a compact setting. The pump end is fairly rigid, to be honest. They could do with making these a little bit more, they could do with having a bit more rotation on these parts, but we'll get this fitted to a computer and we'll see how much of a problem that turns into. And upon the fitting, you'll see the rest of it in action. So, we'll see you after the cut. Okay, so that is our H75 fitted. Now in terms of visual impressiveness, obviously it's much nicer having an aftermarket cooler that matches the rest of the computer fitted. But I have noticed that the dual fan and radiator arrangement does stick out very far into the case, which is not really to my aesthetical preferences. However, you could see that I didn't have the option of putting it along the top at all. Arguably, I could move it all the way over to the front, and that would be a very real consideration for me. In fact, I might even do that for the final version of this, because I've got plenty of space on this particular Corsair case. I've got a big open space at the front here, where I could easily mount this double fan and radiator assembly. And then finally, the other option is simply to take off the back fan and just have the radiator and single fan tucked up against the edge of the case. Now this may damage performance, but we don't know. I'm going to run additional tests to find out if the dual fans in the push-pull configuration do actually make any kind of difference here at all. Now obviously they must make some difference, otherwise Corsair wouldn't supply them. But the question is, does it make a difference when you're running stock speeds, when you're not interested in overclocking the balls off of your processor? Because to be honest, if you want max performance and you want to overclock the nuts off of your chip, you should be using something like the H100 or even the H110, depending on what CPU you've got. If you're just going for a nicer looking cooler and silence and just above standard cooling, then the H75, I reckon you'll probably get away with a single fan on this. So we'll find out. Okay, so here is our temperature burn-in run. This is on the stock cooler. The computer's been idling for about half an hour or so, so we're at general operating temperatures now. So we're going to start up Intel burn-in test. This is going to max out every core the CPU has got, and now we'll see how that runs. We're going to need to leave this to run for about 2 or 3 minutes at least to let heat soak set in, because what will happen is initially the fan will just blow all of the heat out, and the metal heatsink will just soak up all the heat. Then after a while it will have absorbed as much heat as it can carry, and then the temperatures will start rising again. So we should see this initial boost, then it will level out, and then it will rise again as heat soak sets in. So let's leave that to run for about 5 or 10 minutes, see how that runs. Okay, so that is 2 runs of Intel burn test done, and overall we were topping out at just shy of 70 degrees, so given time and a hot day we can definitely believe that that will manage to break 70 degrees. Now that's slightly concerning because Intel CPUs are typically rated for up to about 73 degrees, so keep in mind these are worst case figures. This is the most devastating burn-in test there is, and as you can see the Intel stock cooler, it was struggling. It was really struggling to keep the temperatures down there. Okay, so we're now hooked up with the Corsair H75 water cooler, and initial reactions, our idle temperatures are a couple of degrees lower. We're in sort of the low 20s rather than the mid 20s. Not that that makes any difference whatsoever. In terms of noise levels, I can't see the difference, to be honest. I've used an audio test just with my ears, and I'm using a smartphone decibel meter. I could not see any noticeable difference with either. I'm going to do exactly the same as what I did last time. I'm going to do 2 runs on all threads, and we'll see what we get from that. Alright, we're around to the end of the second test. Heat soak just starting to set in, and we've got the temperatures just creeping up to 53 there. However, remember the stock cooler was looking for 70 degrees. So we're seeing anywhere between 15 and 20 degrees drop under load here. That's massive. So just for argument's sake, I'm going to stick this on 100 times to run. I'm going to leave this running for like 15-20 minutes and just see what we can get that peak up to. I want to see if that will hit 55 or not. Okay, so we're just past 15 minutes now, and in addition to the first 2 tests I run, we're probably at about 20 minutes total burn-in time on one of the most punishing burn-in tests known to man. And as you can see, we still haven't managed to top 60 degrees. It's crept up to 57 with the heat soak, but it still hasn't gone over that 60 degrees marker. And on top of that, the fans are still idling. If I wanted to, I could go into BIOS and dial up those fan speeds to get more air flowing through the radiator, but to be honest, at less than 60 degrees, I don't need to. This thing is as hot as it's possibly going to get, and it's still silent. So the Corsair H75 water cooler, very impressive performance over the Intel stock cooler. Although the idle temperatures were very similar to each other, as soon as we had placed a load on the CPU, it became apparently obvious that the Corsair water cooler was vastly superior in its ability to keep soaking up that heat through extended use. It's also just as quiet, and obviously with this design it looks much smarter in a show computer than the little air cooler that comes with your CPU. So my slight niggles, the 120mm radiator, it is perfectly big enough to manage an i5. However, if you're going up to an i7 or a bigger CPU, possibly like an AMD 8-core or something like that, I think you're going to start struggling a little bit, especially if you start overclocking. So it's fine on the mid-range CPUs, but as obvious, if you're going with a high-end CPU, you're going to need the H100 or the H110. Certainly, as far as the H110 is concerned, that is for balls to the walls overclocking. You don't need that unless you're overclocking. The fan setup, as you can see, I finally settled on a single fan on the radiator, and I moved the extra fan to the exhaust point. Now on this computer, I found that there was only like 1 or 2 degrees difference between the single fan and the push-pull configuration. After talking with some of my friends, they all told me that they got completely different results with various computers that they'd had and similar setups. So whether you need the push-pull config or a single fan, that's entirely up to you. My recommendation is to try both and see which you get the most performance out of. Certainly for me, I think having these two PWM fans apart to get a wind tunnel effect, I think that's going to give better overall performance, and it reduces the number of fans in the case, which ultimately means quieter performance, and that is another sticking point for me. I do not like noisy computers. I am interested in keeping the CPU under 60 degrees in a quiet environment, and for that point the Corsair H75 worked fantastically. So for mid-range builds, I'll be using this again. For a top-end build, I'd recommend moving up to the H100. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye for now.